Hello everybody, I'm making this video about apples. I would like to start with the motivation behind this video. My friend is making TikTok videos. We already had sessions about other type of machines, so Commodores and so on. But today I prepared few apples to be able to show the generations. So what are those generations? So let me start with some history. And here I would like to say there is a generation 0. This is Apple I. Why I call it generation 0? Because I think it is more of a history, but this is expensive, it has no software. Because of those reasons, I say this is generation 0. But it is still interesting because this is when the two Steves, so Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs, met each other and they founded Apple. Let's jump to the first generation, which is really important. This is Apple II. Apple II is one of the Trinity. So there were three computers, home computers, whatever we call. So there were three of them: Commodore PET, TRS-80 or Trash-80, and Apple II. Apple II is a long-lasting story. I think it has a dozen revisions or even more. But let me just select few of those. So the first Apple II is a kind of collector item. I have an early version, but it is not really good for a kind of daily use or playing around. Instead of that, I would go for a 2A. It has more memory and it is more suitable for daily use. Instead of 2E, I'm using 2C. The reason behind is very simple. It is integrated, everything is inside. So when we are making a kind of computer show, then this is what I put on the desk because it is easy to use. There is one more model I would like to mention. This is 2GS, which is compatible with the Apple II series. But in fact, this is a 16-bit model, so this is a kind of nowhere land. I really like this model. It has a good graphics in 16-bit mode. And this is also an important machine because this is the last one where Wozniak worked as an engineer on something at Apple. Before I'm jumping to the next generation, it is interesting to mention that production of Apple IIs started in the 70s and they were produced up to early 90s. As far as I remember, the Platinum 2E model was produced up to 93. There was an interim generation, so these are kind of rarity or interim solution. I wouldn't recommend it just as a collector item, so this is Apple III. Apple III is a kind of enhanced Apple II. The intention was behind to make a business machine. The other one is Lisa, which was in fact technically a superior computer, so it had graphical user interface, mouse control, whatsoever, but practically it was a failure. The reason behind is twofold. First of all, the CPU was not fast enough to move all the thingies, and the second was the cost. If you can afford one, especially Lisa is a good collector's item, but otherwise they are not a kind of mass production computers. So jump to the Macintosh. The classic Macintosh was black and white. The machine itself was a failure. It is strange why I do say that. Practical sales went up after the introduction, but it's fallen back to the level where it was not sustainable. The design of the first Mac was really interesting because the project was some kind of hijacked by Steve Jobs, and how he acted that time led to a break. So Jobs acted like lead. He also tried to get the CEO position. He organized a kind of coup, but he failed, and because of that, he had to leave Apple. After this fiasco, he founded the Next, which will be interesting later on, but the Macintosh was developed further without Steve Jobs. From the classic Macintosh line, it is hard to recommend an early model. Why do I say that? First of all, there are memory limitations. Second, they were limited, so they cut the cost and they cut also the hard drive. But not just the hard drive, but the controller as well. It took a few revisions until the Macintosh, the classic Macintosh, became a really good computer. I tend to say that the Plus, so Macintosh Plus, is the first one where it is easy to add memory and hard drive. But instead of that, I would recommend the SE or the Classic. The second one is a good choice if you want to have a cheap machine, which is easy to use. It has internal hard drive, it is easy to connect BlueSCSI, as well as it is using the 8BB connector, so the new mouse and keyboard, and as well as when it was introduced, it was a cheap machine, they sold in volume, easy to find spare parts if necessary. For this machine, I would recommend to use System 6 because it is kind of lightweight, but still modern enough, so easy to use and easy to find software. Beside the classic Macintosh, there's the group of Macintosh II machines. What is the difference between them? Two things. First of all, color display, and the second one is expansion. Jobs was against to produce a color and expandable machine. I think the reason behind that was cost, and you cannot produce a compact model if it is expandable. If you check out the first Macintosh 2, it really looks like a PC. Later on, it changed a little bit, so you can find smaller versions where they cut the expansion slots. That way, they are really small and cute, but sorry to say that, they are still a little bit similar to IBM PCs. What I like in these machines is that they expanded it step by step. So while the original Macintosh started with 68,000 CPU, the Macintosh 2 had 68,020, and they introduced the 30 and the 40 step by step. If you want to have one of these Motorola-based Apple IIs, maybe I can recommend the 2SI. It is kind of cheap, fast enough, not too fast, so the speed is a bit better than the original Macintosh 2, but more affordable and easy to find. Of course, there are faster machines. For example, a cheap version is the LC. I really like this small machine. The problem with that one is expansion. On the other hand, it is a kind of cheap machine. Of course, you can go for a much faster Quadra. I really like them, but it is harder to find them. I prefer to use these machines with System 7, so 7.1 or 7.5. It depends on which machine, the memory and the disk capacity. The next generation, if you just take a look at the case, really looks like the previous one. As Motorola lagged behind Intel, they had to step forward and they switched to a new architecture. It was designed and steered by three companies, so IBM, Apple and Motorola. The result is really good. These CPUs are faster than the Intel equivalent, so the Pentiums, and Apple also solved the problem of compatibility. They implemented on-the-fly compiler, which is compiling the 68K code, so the old Motorola CPU, to the PowerPC. They even used this solution for the operating system itself, so several parts of System 7.5 still used Motorola code. And here I hit what I do recommend. Well, it is not easy. I have an early model and later models as well. My favorite is the 7200 because this is what I got from one of my colleagues, and it is fast enough for System 8. I mean, not System 8, Mac OS 8. This is when Apple changed the naming convention of the operating system, so Mac OS 8 is the successor of System 7. But the reality is that they really struggled with the operating system. macOS 8 was introduced in 1997. If you check out the Windows series, so you know that Windows 95 was introduced 2 years earlier. So Apple had a problem to renew its operating system. The price of the Apple shares dropped significantly, and first John Sculley failed. He was a long-lasting CEO because he was the one who, let's say, fired Steve Jobs. He was replaced by Spindler, and then, after 3 years, Jill Amelio. The second one is considered as the worst Apple CEO. Maybe that's true, but he made two decisions which saved Apple. The first one was macOS 8. He realized the struggle and instructed everybody to put everything together and release something. That was not really nice because under the hood it was still the same old System 7 with new thingies and add-ons and small changes and hacks, but it gave Apple some time to reconsider things. His second decision was to buy Next to have its operating system. As I mentioned earlier, Steve Jobs was the founder of Next. That way, he could return to Apple, and within few months, he became CEO. So Jobs became the new lead in 97, and in 98, the last group of the computer was released, I would like to mention. I call this group as New World Raw Machines. I know it sounds like Brave New World, But finally it was not a struggle, but a real success. With Jobs' lead, they made two big changes. The first was the design. They are designed a way to be easy to recognize. They are Apple. I think I'm not lying if I say that since then, Apple is kind of dictating the design language. Next to the design, they also renewed the internals, so the technical solution. These machines still use PowerPC, but instead of numbers, they introduced G3 as generation 3 and G4 and later on G5, which was a wise move, I think. But what is more important, instead of legacy, they introduced the new USB connectors, as well as they started to use the same memories as PCs. So everything became kind of standardized. It was easier to find third-party solutions for the computers. And before I'm getting to the end of this video, it would be nice to recommend something from this group. But it is really hard to recommend just one or two, and because of the design and other aspects, they are rarities or very nice, or so they are special. It is hard to select one. But let me try to do that. So from the early ones, I would recommend G3 iMac. It has a really sharp CRT, and this is just perfect with Mac OS 9. From the G4 models, I would go for a Power Mac or Mac Mini, because this is when they introduced this one. And now I'm reaching G5, which is, well, I have two of them behind me. On the left side, there is the full aluminum case Power Mac with two CPUs, lots of memory. It is really a beast. While the other one is a full integrated iMac with the LCD. It is really sharp and I really like it. This machine was really ahead of its time. So I would recommend this one instead of the Power Mac. So that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed these generations. The images in this video partially came from Wikipedia and Creative Commons, and I would like to say a big thank you to them because they are making the pictures free under Creative Commons license. Please comment if you would recommend another kind of grouping or you would have a recommendation for a machine. I'm really interested, and I wish all of you a good day. Bye bye.